A mistake? I echoed, laughing bitterly. A mistake is forgetting to turn off the stove. A 6-month affair isn't a mistake, Lisa. It's a series of deliberate choices. Choices that you made over and over again, knowing exactly what you were doing. The day it all began was just like any other, a crisp Saturday morning in early fall. I had just finished mowing the lawn and headed inside to grab a cold beer. That's when I saw my wife, Lisa, sitting on the couch, completely absorbed in her phone. She was giggling softly, her face glowing in the light of the screen. It wasn't unusual to see her engrossed in her phone, but something about her laughter struck me as different. Too intimate, too personal. She didn't even glance up as I passed by into the kitchen. At first, I brushed it off. Lisa had always been a warm, outgoing person, and I trusted her completely. But as the weeks went by, her behavior became harder to ignore. She started guarding her phone like a prized possession, keeping it close at all times. She began working late more frequently, citing a major new project at her company. And then there were the midnight texts, a habit she'd never had before. One afternoon, my curiosity got the better of me. Lisa had gone upstairs to take a shower, leaving her phone charging on the kitchen counter. I knew I shouldn't invade her privacy, but the unease in my gut pushed me to pick it up. Her passcode hadn't changed, her first mistake. What I found gutted me. The screen was filled with messages from someone named Brian. My stomach sank as I scrolled through the thread, reading flirtatious texts and inside jokes. Then came the one that hit hardest. Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you. It felt like the air had been knocked out of me. My hands trembled as I continued scrolling, my breath quick and shallow. The timestamps on the messages aligned perfectly with the nights Lisa had claimed to be working late. There were even photos, selfies of the two of them laughing in what was unmistakably a hotel room. She hadn't even tried to be discreet. The betrayal hit me harder than I thought possible. Lisa, the woman I'd loved and trusted for over a decade, was having an affair. My mind was a storm of anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. But above all, I felt like a fool. How could I have missed the signs? How long had this been happening right under my nose? I placed the phone back on the counter just as I heard the water stop upstairs. My heart pounded as I forced myself to appear normal. Confronting her then would only backfire. She'd deny it, twist the story, and somehow make me the villain. No, I needed to think this through, to act carefully. That night, I barely slept. As Lisa lay beside me, oblivious to the turmoil in my mind, I replayed the last few months, piecing it all together. The sudden late nights, her distant demeanor, the phone she clung to like a lifeline. It all added up. And then there was Brian. Who was he? Did he have a family? Did he even know I existed? The next morning, while Lisa was still asleep, I started digging. It didn't take long to find him. A quick scroll through Lisa's social media brought up a photo from her company's holiday party, where Brian had been tagged. As I suspected, he was a coworker. But my search didn't stop there. I found something else, something that added a new layer to my pain. Brian was married. His wife, Karen, appeared in several of his photos, along with 2 young children. The revelation stung, but it also sparked an idea. Brian had just as much to lose as Lisa. I wasn't alone in this betrayal, and knowing that gave me an odd sense of vindication. For the rest of the day, my thoughts kept returning to Karen. Did she know what was happening? Had she noticed the same warning signs I had? The more I thought about her, the more I realized I wanted to meet her, not just to share the pain, but to plan something bigger. Something that would make both Lisa and Brian regret every choice they'd made. By the time Lisa returned from her supposed errands, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to be the passive, heartbroken husband. This betrayal wouldn't destroy me. It would redefine me. Lisa had no idea what was coming. The morning after discovering Lisa's affair, I woke up feeling an unusual calmness. The initial wave of heartbreak had receded, leaving behind a cold, calculated determination. If Lisa expected me to confront her with tears and desperate pleas for an explanation, she had gravely underestimated me. She had betrayed me, and I intended to make sure she felt the full weight of her choices. The best part? She wouldn't see it coming. First, I needed more information. Knowing Brian's name and that he had a wife named Karen wasn't enough. If I was going to involve Karen, I had to be armed with more than just suspicions. I spent hours combing through social media, piecing together a portrait of their lives. Their posts painted a curated picture of domestic bliss. Karen appeared to be a devoted wife and mother, sharing snapshots of their children's soccer games, family hikes, and cozy holiday moments. The stark contrast between her picture-perfect online presence and Brian's secret life disgusted me. Using Lisa's text messages as a roadmap, I pieced together a timeline of their affair. It had been going on for at least 6 months, though I suspected it could have started even earlier. Their messages were riddled with coded language and references to hotels. What infuriated me most wasn't just the betrayal, but the effort they had put into deceiving me. The meticulous lengths they went to hide their affair made my blood boil. Once I had gathered enough details, I set my plan into motion. I decided to host a backyard gathering, a casual barbecue with an underlying purpose. It had to look completely normal, something Lisa wouldn't question. I drafted a guest list, carefully curating it to include neighbors, a few of Lisa's co-workers, excluding Brian, and most importantly, Karen. Reaching out to Karen was the trickiest part. I couldn't exactly message her and say, "Hi, I'm the husband of your husband's mistress. Want to join us for a barbecue?" Instead, I crafted a polite Facebook message, introducing myself as Lisa's husband and inviting her family to a neighborhood gathering. I mentioned we had mutual acquaintances from Lisa's workplace, which wasn't entirely untrue. Karen responded graciously, thanking me for the invitation and confirming that she and Brian would attend. The moment I saw her reply, I felt a grim satisfaction. Step 1 was complete. Lisa, oblivious to my intentions, even helped plan the event. She suggested recipes, picked up decorations, and talked about how nice it would be to spend time with friends and coworkers. Watching her act so normal, all while I carried the weight of her betrayal, only fueled my resolve. In the days leading up to the gathering, I meticulously prepared. Everything had to appear authentic. I mowed the lawn, set up outdoor lighting, and borrowed a neighbor's large grill. The menu was simple but inviting: burgers, hot dogs, and a variety of sides. It had to be a picture-perfect suburban barbecue. As the day approached, I noticed a slight shift in Lisa's demeanor. She seemed uneasy, perhaps sensing something was off, or maybe her guilt was catching up with her. "Did you invite anyone from my work?" she asked casually. I smiled and named a few co-workers, deliberately leaving Brian off the list. Her shoulders relaxed, and she smiled back, visibly relieved. That moment solidified my resolve. She suspected nothing. The morning of the gathering, I made sure every detail was perfect. I double-checked the guest list, arranged the seating to ensure Karen and Lisa were within earshot of each other, and rehearsed the potential conversations I might have. Timing was crucial. This wasn't just about exposing Lisa's affair. It was about orchestrating a moment where both she and Brian would be humiliated in front of Karen. I wanted them to feel the sting of betrayal magnified by the presence of friends and neighbors. As I stood in the backyard, surveying the setup, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. This wasn't merely about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity. Lisa had taken something from me, but I wasn't going to let her keep it. By the time the sun set on that gathering, Lisa would know exactly what it felt like to be blindsided, to have her world ripped apart in an instant. And when Karen walked through that gate, hand in hand with her husband, the first domino would fall. All I had to do was wait. The day of the backyard gathering arrived bright and warm, a perfect fall afternoon in the suburbs. I woke early, both because there was much to prepare and because sleep had eluded me. My mind raced with nervous energy, replaying every detail of my plan. Everything had to go smoothly. This wasn't just a barbecue. It was a carefully crafted reckoning. Lisa, blissfully unaware of my intentions, spent the morning helping me set up. She arranged flowers for the tables and talked excitedly about how nice it would be to catch up with everyone. I watched her closely, searching for any hint of guilt or suspicion, but her demeanor was calm and cheerful. If she suspected anything, she didn't show it. Her behavior only stoked my anger. How could she stand there, smiling and laughing, after everything she'd done? By noon, the backyard was ready. String lights crisscrossed overhead, The tables were decorated with casual but elegant centerpieces, and the grill was prepped and ready. The scene was picture-perfect, warm, inviting, and utterly deceptive. I had invited about 15 people, a mix of neighbors, Lisa's coworkers, excluding Brian until now, and a few old friends. But my heart raced as I thought about the last guests on the list, Brian and Karen. Karen had texted me earlier that morning, thanking me again for the invitation and confirming that they would be there. I replied with a friendly "looking forward to seeing you both," as if this were just another casual neighborhood gathering. The truth? I was counting down the minutes until they walked through the gate. As the guests began to arrive, I played the role of the perfect host. I handed out drinks, flipped burgers on the grill, and chatted about sports and local gossip. Lisa mingled with ease, laughing and socializing as if everything was fine. Every time I glanced at her, I felt a surge of fury. But I kept my composure. The time for confrontation wasn't yet. An hour into the gathering, I saw them. Brian and Karen entered the backyard, hand in hand, wearing polite smiles. Brian looked every bit the suburban dad, khakis, polo shirt, confident posture. Karen, on the other hand, was warm and approachable, her simple sundress and tied-back hair giving her an unassuming charm. She seemed genuinely happy to meet new people, and for a moment, guilt twisted in my chest, knowing what was about to happen. I greeted them with a wide smile, shaking Brian's hand firmly and giving Karen a friendly nod. Across the yard, Lisa was mid-conversation with a neighbor when she spotted them. Her expression froze for the briefest moment before she forced a smile and waved. I could see the panic flicker in her eyes. Good. Brian was more composed. He greeted Lisa with a casual politeness, but I noticed he avoided looking at her for too long. Karen, oblivious, complimented the setup and remarked on how nice it was to meet new people in the neighborhood. I guided them toward a table near the center of the yard, carefully seating them with people Lisa and Brian both knew. As the afternoon progressed, I worked to subtly shape the atmosphere. I made small talk with Karen, learning about her life and family. She talked about their kids, their sports schedules, and how busy Brian had been with work lately. I nodded sympathetically, glancing at Brian, who sat stiffly, nursing his beer with visible discomfort. Lisa, meanwhile, looked as though she was barely holding it together. Her laughter was forced, her movements unnaturally stiff. I caught her stealing glances at me, as if trying to gauge whether I knew something. She was probably wondering why I had invited Brian and Karen, but she didn't dare ask. By the time dinner was served, the tension was almost tangible. Every glance, every word seemed to carry an unspoken weight. Lisa's forced composure, Brian's nervous demeanor, Karen's oblivious warmth. It all felt like a powder keg, waiting for the right moment to explode. And I was more than ready to light the match. I could almost see Lisa's thoughts racing. Did I know? Was this all just a coincidence? I let her simmer in her paranoia. At one point, I sat beside Karen and started a conversation about her hobbies. She mentioned painting, and I nodded along, pretending genuine interest. All the while, I could feel Lisa's eyes on us. She was sitting across the yard, half-heartedly engaged in a conversation with a neighbor, but her attention was locked on me. She hated that I was talking to Karen, and watching her try to stay composed was almost satisfying. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the string lights twinkled overhead, I knew it was time to take the next step. Everything was in place. The atmosphere was casual, guests chatting and enjoying the food, but Lisa and Brian were visibly uneasy. Neither dared to make a scene, but the tension in their expressions was unmistakable. Karen, still blissfully unaware, was laughing with one of the neighbors. I stood, raising my glass and clinking it gently to gather everyone's attention. I just want to thank you all for coming tonight. I began, keeping my voice steady and friendly. Lisa's head snapped up, her smile faltering for the first time. It's not often we get the chance to gather like this, and I think it's so important to build a sense of community. I paused, locking eyes with Lisa for a brief moment before continuing. I also want to thank my wife, Lisa, for helping me put this together. And, of course, a special welcome to Karen and Brian. It's so nice to have new faces here. Brian shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his smile strained. Lisa looked as though she might faint, her eyes darting nervously between me and the crowd. Karen smiled warmly, completely unaware of the subtext in my words. My heart raced as adrenaline coursed through me. This was just the opening act. The real confrontation was yet to come. The backyard buzzed with casual chatter, but beneath the surface, the tension was palpable. Lisa moved through the crowd, smiling and laughing, but her stiff movements betrayed her unease. The arrival of Brian and Karen had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. Every time she thought no one was watching, she cast nervous glances toward me or Brian. I knew she was desperate to ask why they were there, but she didn't dare confront me. Brian tried to maintain his composure, sticking close to Karen and avoiding Lisa entirely. Karen, meanwhile, laughed with neighbors and complimented the setup, radiating a genuine warmth that made the situation even more heartbreaking. She had no idea her husband and Lisa were hiding an affair that could destroy her world. As the evening wore on, the soft glow of the string lights gave the gathering a serene quality. But the tension between Lisa and Brian simmered just beneath the surface. I mingled with the guests, topping off drinks and engaging in small talk, all the while keeping an eye on them. I wanted them to feel it. The same uncertainty and paranoia that had haunted me since discovering their betrayal. At one point, I caught Lisa cornering Brian near the drinks table. They spoke in hushed tones, their faces uncomfortably close but trying to appear casual. It was a pathetic attempt at discretion. Seizing the opportunity, I approached them. "Everything okay over here?" I asked, my tone casual but loaded with meaning. Lisa flinched, her face paling as if she'd been caught red-handed. "Oh, yes, just talking about work," she stammered, her eyes darting between me and Brian. Brian nodded, his smile weak and unconvincing. "Work, huh?" I said, crossing my arms and tilting my head. "You know, Brian, Lisa's been putting in a lot of late nights at work lately. She's mentioned how busy things have been." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Lisa's face went blank, her forced composure slipping for a fraction of a second. Brian shifted his weight awkwardly, avoiding eye contact. The silence between us was electric, a charged moment where everything felt on the verge of collapsing. I smiled faintly, letting the tension build. This was just the beginning. Brian's face drained of color, and Lisa's grip on her glass tightened so hard I thought it might shatter. Before either of them could respond, Karen wandered over, slipping her arm casually through Brian's. "What are we talking about?" she asked cheerfully, her presence amplifying the tension in the air. I couldn't suppress the flicker of satisfaction as Lisa's shoulders visibly stiffened. "Oh, just work stuff," I said smoothly, flashing Karen a disarming smile. "But you're lucky, Karen. You got a husband who works hard and still makes time for family. That's rare these days." Brian coughed sharply, nearly choking on his drink, while Lisa's face turned a shade of crimson I had never seen before. Karen, blissfully unaware, beamed. "Oh, Brian's amazing. I'm so lucky to have him." Her words stung, not because they were aimed at me, but because they echoed what Lisa used to say about our marriage. Back when I believed it was strong, back before her betrayal shattered everything. The evening wore on, and I maintained my subtle game of cat and mouse. I steered conversations, keeping Lisa and Brian on edge. Every time they tried to retreat into the crowd or avoid suspicion, I was there, hovering, listening, and dropping subtle comments that only they would understand. At one point, I deliberately seated Karen next to Lisa during dessert. The forced proximity was exquisite. Lisa barely touched her pie, her hands trembling slightly as she engaged in strained small talk with Karen. As the gathering wound down, I knew it was time. The stage was set, the audience primed. I had spent the evening planting seeds of doubt and curiosity, and now it was time to let the truth unfold. I cleared my throat, signaling for attention. "I just want to thank everyone again for coming tonight," I began, keeping my voice calm and even. The crowd quieted, turning toward me. Lisa, seated near the center of the yard, looked like a deer in headlights. Brian, standing by the fence with Karen at his side, gripped his beer bottle so tightly I thought it might crack. Hosting this gathering has reminded me how important honesty and trust are, I continued, letting my gaze linger on Lisa. They're the foundation of any relationship, whether it's with friends, family, or, most importantly, your spouse. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Lisa's mouth open slightly, as though she wanted to protest but couldn't find the words. Brian shifted uncomfortably, while Karen looked on with a polite but uncertain smile, clearly trying to understand where I was going. And sometimes, I said, letting a harder edge creep into my tone, we discover things that challenge that trust. Things that force us to reevaluate who we can rely on. The silence was suffocating. Lisa's face turned ashen, and Brian's knuckles whitened around his drink. Karen glanced between them and me, confusion flickering into alarm. I took a deep breath, steadying myself for what came next. "Lisa," I said, my voice as sharp as a blade. "Do you want to tell everyone here about your late-night work meetings with Brian, or should I?" The yard erupted into a wave of gasps and murmurs. Lisa's chair scraped against the concrete as she shot to her feet. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice trembling. "This isn't the time or place for whatever this is." Karen turned to Lisa, then to Brian, her confusion giving way to rising anger. "What is he talking about?" she demanded, her voice climbing. Brian opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a man wishing for the earth to swallow him whole. "I'm talking about the affair," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. "The one you've been having with my wife for months. I have the texts, the photos, everything." Karen's face crumpled as the realization washed over her. "Brian," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. The yard fell utterly silent, every eye fixed on the four of us. The weight of the moment pressed down like a thundercloud ready to burst. Lisa looked like she might faint, while Brian's shoulders slumped in defeat. Their horror was palpable, the dawning realization that their secret was out, that their lives would never be the same. I stepped back, allowing the chaos to unfold. Lisa had wanted to play her games, but now she was the one who had lost. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of victory. The backyard was so thick with tension it felt suffocating. Everyone had gone silent, their gazes darting between Lisa, Brian, and me. Karen stood frozen, her face pale and stricken. Lisa, on the other hand, looked as though she were frantically calculating a way to salvage the moment. But there was no way out. "Let me explain," Lisa stammered, stepping forward, her voice shaking. Her eyes flickered between me, Karen, and the stunned faces of our friends and neighbors. "Explain?" I snapped, my voice sharp and cutting. "What exactly is there to explain, Lisa? The secret texts? The late-night meetings? The hotel room selfies? Or maybe the 6 months you spent making me look like a fool?" Lisa's mouth opened, but no words came out. Karen, meanwhile, had turned to Brian, her face a mixture of fury and heartbreak. "Is this true?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "Tell me he's lying. Tell me this isn't real." Brian shifted uncomfortably, running a hand through his hair, as if it might somehow help him summon the right words. "Karen, he hesitated, his voice weak and pleading. "It's not what it seems." Karen's face twisted in anger. "Not what it seems," she spat, her voice rising. "Are you seriously trying to gaslight me right now, after everything he just said?" She jabbed a finger in my direction. Brian glanced around, his face burning red with humiliation. Can we not do this here?" he asked quietly, barely audible over the growing murmurs of the crowd. "Oh no, Brian," I said loudly, stepping forward. "We're doing this exactly here. You didn't care about discretion when you were sneaking around with my wife, so why should you get privacy now?" The murmurs among the guests swelled. Some neighbors exchanged glances, whispering as though savoring the drama unfolding before them. Others looked uncomfortable, torn between wanting to leave and not wanting to miss the inevitable explosion. Karen's hands shook as she stepped closer to Brian. "You cheated on me? With her?" she demanded, pointing directly at Lisa, her voice rising with every word. "After everything I've done for this family? After all the sacrifices I've made for you?" Lisa opened her mouth, clearly desperate to interject. "Karen, please." "Don't you dare," Karen snapped, cutting her off. "Don't you dare try to justify this. I trusted you. You came into my home, smiled at my children, and all the while, you were sleeping with my husband? Do you even realize what you've done?" Lisa looked like she might crumble, her eyes welling with tears, but no one stepped in to defend her. She glanced at the other guests, her expression pleading for some form of sympathy, but all she met were cold, judgmental stares. Any goodwill she had built in this social circle evaporated in an instant. I stood silently, letting Karen's fury take center stage. It was more satisfying than I could have anticipated, watching Lisa squirm under the weight of her own actions. She had made her choices, and now she was being forced to face the consequences, publicly. The murmurs among the guests grew louder. "Did you know?" One woman whispered to her husband. "I had no idea. I thought they were such a perfect couple," he replied, shaking his head. Lisa finally turned to me, her voice trembling. "James, please," she begged. "Let's talk about this privately. We can fix this. I can fix this." I interrupted with a bitter laugh. "Lisa, you can't even admit what you've done. Fixing this?" I shook my head, my voice dripping with disdain. "That's not even on the table anymore. What you did was unforgivable." Karen, tears now streaming down her face, grabbed her purse. "I can't believe this," she muttered, her voice cracking. "I trusted you, Brian. I trusted you. And you've destroyed everything." She turned sharply on her heel and stormed out of the yard. Brian called after her, his voice pleading, but she didn't stop. The gate slammed behind her, the sound reverberating in the stunned silence that followed. Brian stood awkwardly, his face flushed with shame and embarrassment. "I should, go," he mumbled, avoiding everyone's gaze. "Yeah," I said, my voice cold. "You should." He shuffled out of the yard like a man walking to his own execution. Lisa remained frozen in place, her eyes wide and her tear-streaked face betraying the whirlwind of emotions inside her. She was alone now, the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. The whispers among the guests grew louder, their judgment unmistakable. "Well," I said, turning to the crowd, my voice steady. "Thanks for coming, everyone. I think we're done here." One by one, the neighbors and friends began to leave, some offering me awkward pats on the shoulder or murmuring quiet condolences. No one spared Lisa a glance. No one offered her comfort. By the time the yard was empty, it was just the two of us. Lisa stood by the table, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, as if trying to hold herself together. "James," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please, we can talk about this." I cut her off, my tone cold and final. "No, Lisa, we're done. You made your choice. Now you get to live with the consequences." Without waiting for her response, I turned and walked inside, leaving her standing alone in the dark. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of closure. This wasn't the ending I had envisioned for our marriage, but it was the one she had chosen. And for the first time since discovering her betrayal, I felt like I could finally breathe again. The house was eerily quiet that night. Lisa stayed outside long after everyone had left, probably trying to compose herself. I didn't care. I locked the door behind me and went upstairs to the bedroom, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. Nothing in the house did. Everywhere I looked, there were reminders of the life we had built together, a life she had shattered for something cheap and meaningless. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor as the events of the evening replayed in my mind like a broken record. I thought I would feel triumphant, vindicated even. And to a degree I did. Lisa had been exposed, her lies unraveled in the most public way possible. But now that the dust was settling, an emptiness crept in, a deep, aching void. I had loved her once, trusted her completely. That trust was gone, and with it, the foundation of everything we had shared. A couple of hours later, Lisa finally came inside. Her footsteps were hesitant, and she lingered in the kitchen, pacing or nursing a drink. I couldn't tell. I knew she'd come eventually, unable to resist trying to fix things. But I was done. When she finally appeared in the doorway, her face was pale, her eyes swollen from crying. She looked at me like a child caught stealing, a mix of shame and desperation in her expression. "James," she began, her voice hoarse and trembling, "I know I hurt you. I know I've made a terrible mistake, but can we talk about this? Please." I stared at her, my expression blank. "Talk about what, Lisa? About how you lied to me? About how you threw away our marriage for some fling? What exactly is there left to say?" She stepped closer, her hands clasped tightly together as if in prayer. I wasn't thinking clearly. "It was stupid, James. I swear it didn't mean anything. It was a mistake. A mistake," I echoed, laughing bitterly. "A mistake is forgetting to turn off the stove. A 6-month affair isn't a mistake, Lisa. It's a series of deliberate choices. Choices that you made over and over again, knowing exactly what you were doing." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I didn't feel sorry for her. "I was lonely," she whispered, as though that would somehow make it all better. "We'd grown so distant, James. I felt like you didn't care about me anymore." "Lonely?" I repeated, disbelief cutting through my voice. "And your solution was to destroy everything we've built? To betray me with someone else's husband? You didn't just hurt me, Lisa. You hurt Karen, their kids, and everyone who believed in us." She broke down then, collapsing into a chair and burying her face in her hands. "I know," she sobbed. "I know I ruined everything. But I can fix it. I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, counseling, anything. Just don't give up on us. Please." For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of pity. She looked so small, so broken. But I reminded myself, this wasn't about her pain. It was about mine. The betrayal, the humiliation, the months of lies and deceit. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. "I don't think there's anything left to fix," I said quietly, my voice steady. "You made it clear what I meant to you when you started sneaking around with Brian. That's not a mistake, Lisa. That's who you are, and I can't be with someone like that." Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't waver. I stood, grabbed a pillow and blanket from the bed, and headed toward the guest room. "You can sleep here tonight," I said, not bothering to look back. "We'll figure out the logistics in the morning." The next few weeks passed in a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and uncomfortable conversations with friends and family. Word of the backyard gathering spread quickly, and it wasn't long before the entire neighborhood knew about Lisa's affair. Our once close circle of friends began to distance themselves from her. Karen, understandably, cut all ties with Lisa and filed for divorce from Brian almost immediately. The ripple effects of their betrayal were far-reaching, hurting not just them, but everyone around them. Lisa tried to salvage her reputation, but it was a losing battle. Within a month, she moved out of the house, taking only what she could carry. The silence she left behind was profound, but it was also a relief. For the first time in years, I could breathe without the suffocating weight of her lies. Karen and I spoke a few times in the aftermath, mostly to share information about the affair and to find solace in each other's experiences. Those conversations were raw and painful, but they also provided a strange sense of closure. Lisa's choices had unraveled so much more than just our marriage. But in their wake, I finally felt the possibility of rebuilding, not with her, but with myself. She was heartbroken, understandably so, but fiercely determined to move forward for the sake of her kids. I admired her resilience, and in her strength, I found some solace, knowing I wasn't alone in my pain. As the weeks turned into months, I began the slow process of rebuilding my life. The house, once a haunting reminder of betrayal, gradually became my sanctuary. I painted the walls, rearranged the furniture, and threw myself into hobbies I had neglected for far too long. It wasn't easy, and the progress was incremental, but with each small step, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. One evening, as I sat on the back porch with a beer in hand, I found myself reflecting on everything that had unfolded. Lisa's betrayal had devastated me, but it had also forced me to re-examine my life. I realized how long I had been living on autopilot, ignoring the cracks in our relationship because facing them would have been harder than pretending they didn't exist. In a strange way, her infidelity had liberated me, not just from her, but from the complacency that had quietly settled over my life. It had shaken me awake, forcing me to confront truths I had avoided for too long. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson, I raised my bottle in a silent toast. To the truth, no matter how painful, to new beginnings, and to the peace that comes from knowing there was nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to hit the like button. It only takes a second, but it means the world to us. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any upcoming videos. Something brand new is dropping tomorrow, and we can't wait to share it with you. And remember to hit the notification bell so you'll be among the first to see it. See you in the next video.